Welcome to the Startup Defense. My name is Callye. Today I have Matt Hawkins of Pryzm. Pryzm is changing the game for market intelligence in GovCon. I know that sounds super boring, but winning is pretty good, right? I think people like to win. Full disclosure, we use Pryzm. We'll get into that a little bit. And I've shown it off to, I don't know, 30 people because I think it's really cool what they're up to. But before we get into what market intelligence is and like how to land contracts and use information to be your best friend, Matt, what are you passionate about right now?
Right now, I really care about the relationships of this ecosystem. And I know that sounds buzzwordy and stuff, but I think I've been in my career for long enough where I've seen that there's 5 lifetimes of possible opportunities that you can do in this world in national security. And so what I found was most adventurous or most exciting was actually the people you meet by doing it, not just what you work on. And so I'm trying to bring that into a more scaled perspective with who's working on Pryzm, who Pryzm works with. And I think what that really means is I think at the end of the day, what I really care about is not just delivering one type of technology to the warfighter or making the world or one mission more solvable. What I care more about is the overall ecosystem's efficiency in delivering national security, delivering technology that keeps deterring aggressive conflict in a pure adversary context. I know big buzzwords, but at the end of the day, I care about how the system works. Like I've always cared about how big picture things come together, very nonlinear systems. That's why I was a mechanical engineer trying to understand that when I was in school. And so what I'm really passionate about is making this whole thing work better together. And that's why we started Pryzm. I would say, yes, we started as a market intelligence platform, but it's become a lot more than that. We're really becoming this ecosystem platform for all sides of the table of defense acquisitions to move smarter, to move faster, and move with better collaboration. And so I think if there was one thing that I could say I'm most passionate about, it's really how this ecosystem operates, because that's what's going to bring prosperity and safety to the world and into the 21st century. So that's my starting point.
Well, we share this because, and I've told Justin, who's on your team, the same thing, is this is a relationship business. And you look at the numbers, you look at here's these budgets, like here's who's in charge of this office. You look at all of the details, but at the end of the day, the market is very small. And the market of people that are actually innovating, that are going after the hard problems and the white space in the market is incredibly small. It's not stadium size. It's like, it's quite small, and you're one step removed from almost anybody in the market. So building relationships and making the connections together and being a good agent, putting out good work, working with good people is a force multiplier. Yeah, I think we kind of share that. Every time I meet somebody, I can look at their LinkedIn or we're in a conversation and they're like, oh yeah, I used to do this. I'm like, hey, do you know this person? Okay, you work with one of my friends, right? If you do this for a long enough period of time, you'll find there's only thousands of people that are working on these problem sets. And in specific problem sets, there's maybe hundreds of people that are actually doing the work, right? There's like large apparatus around it, but like the relationships hold that together.
Yeah, I would agree. I think when you look at a particular capability set, for example, counter UAS, that's one we focus on a lot at Pryzm. Just the market's easy to track. It's a very poignant problem, both domestically and internationally. To understand some of the offline context of what is new and innovative in that space, it's about who knows the latest from the front, basically, and who you can get connected to give you that information, right? People talk about the requirements process within DoD, how inaccessible JSIDS is, for example, to the average person, somewhat for good reason, but it makes it hard to know where the state of the art is going. It's these conversations between people to be able to say, hey, I'm seeing this happen. I think you as a startup founder should go chew on this and go think about that. That's what's actually going to create the innovation. And I'll say too, yes, there are point solutions that are very defense focused, but I'm very passionate about a lot of this technology being able to translate either into or from the commercial space. We talk about companies like Forterra that are building like autonomous ground systems. Yes, there's a military capability, but there's a very real commercial capability as well that I think we're seeing a lot of interest from the DoD in bringing to market. But I see, just like with the Apollo program, a lot of two-way benefits to that. So yes, getting on contract with SOCOM, with, AFRL is going to require knowing a few key people and channeling your network to get intros with those folks and then iterating over time. But the outcome of that at scale, I actually think is a net positive, not just for the US, but for the allied countries and for the world. So I wanted to foot stomp on that sort of adjacency as well with the technology we're talking about developing here. What can start in the DoD very much can scale to the rest of society. And I'm really excited about where that, especially around autonomy, where that can go.
Yeah, there's a lot of negativity around dual use. And part of the scope of this show was to highlight people moving from commercial startups, taking that technology and moving it over.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of confusion on what that actually looks like because there's so much work that has to get done to operationalize the technology for a different context.
Yeah.
But the idea, the legacy concept in defense was we start from essentially first principles again. And so when we go and see what somebody's doing, I kid you not, we've had multiple instances where somebody spent over $1 million to make a bad Raspberry Pi, right?
Yep.
And I'm like, your idea is actually very good. It's so good that I teach Girl Scouts how to build robots with them. Like we sponsor robotics teams in high school and middle school because it's very easy to use and your idea is on point. The problem is that like at scale, this problem has been solved dozens of times, and so the new sentiment of we want to move very, very quickly. What already exists? What's the secure version of this? Like where can we start and then move this over? And what does that look like? It's been a big change in the recent few years. And what I'm really liking right now is one of the things that we use the tool for is there's all of the modernization efforts that have rolled out. And all of the modernization efforts are, we want to move fast. We want rapid integration. We want rapid customization. We want rapid prototyping. We want to move quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I chuckle because unless you make stuff, you really just can't move fast. And there's not that many people that make things. So I'm like, I don't understand how this company is going to move fast, but I do know I can see who's already winning this and I can team with them and we're the go fast button. So but I like the sentiment, right? I like the sentiment of we need to get after these, figure out what already works, move it over here, field it in a month.
But speed in the federal space, in the defense space, speed isn't going to come from just how fast a commercial industry team can build. Even if they're venture backed and a gazillion dollars, it's about their mission partner and how quickly that mission partner can actually get the contract in place and allocate the funding for it. Or better yet, if it's meant to be a rapid prototyping exercise, how fast they can go through justifying the commercial investments or having to justify a sole source, for example. There's a lot of hurdles to speed that are completely independent of the technology development process. And that's why, this wasn't meant to be a pitch for Pryzm, but that's why we started this company, was because it's that correlation between market opportunity signal, demand signal, funding data, being able to help both sides of that, puzzle piece fit together. And I mean, we were actually pretty surprised once we started seeing people come to Pryzm, not for capture work, but for market research and market engagement work. People were saying, hey, I want to see all the contracts for a particular counter UAS market and who are the vendors and how are they, what are their timelines for performing? Because then that helps them build a list of potential partners, potential candidates, for a contract in a way that I think had previously taken a really, really long time. And so being able to serve both sides of the table, something that we're excited about, because that information landscape was frankly very siloed and very fractured just a few years ago. And it's now becoming more important to connect.
I want to dive into that a little bit because this kind of ties your initial statement with this statement is teaming is a strategy that every big uses and every successful company uses, but we work with people that have won an SBIR phase 2. We work with startups that just got seed funding or Series A funding. We work with small businesses that want to grow. That's our core is innovators that are trying to scale. And the reluctance to team or the lack of knowledge of teaming is something that is very curious to me because it's core to our strategy. But here you have this growth strategy that every single company that's successful uses and almost no company that's starting uses.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a business genius or anything, but I'm like, maybe we should look at who we can team with to win these contracts, because it looks like these contracts are only ever won by a handful of companies. And every single time these other contracts are won, they're won by a team of people, not one company. So like, why are you applying to this contract? Seems like a waste of time to me.
Yeah. Well, and I think like large efforts also get the majority of the press, right? We're talking about, NGAD just got awarded, and that's like this huge teaming agreement with Boeing and a bunch of subs. And when I was on the F-35 program, there's a lot of interaction with sort of the three main primes, or between Lockheed and its two predominant subs. And so like you do hear about these legacy companies, these large companies kind of owning that space. But what they also have off the shelf for the most part is capability that the government's been asking for. And companies that are just in cyber phase one, they may not have, even if they have a very simple capability, it may not be fieldable, it may not be usable, it may not even be testable, or even something you can touch. And I think that's kind of like a threshold I see with a lot of companies, whether they're in software or hardware, is do you have a functional prototype? If you have a functional prototype, find a teaming partner that can add to it. But if you aren't at your functional prototype yet, I think you really got to find ways to support yourself, build out your core IP, build your team around that. And then you can go to market with something that's real, because this industry is riddled with PowerPoint products.
Now you're giving away my business strategy, right?
Oh, okay.
But
Okay.
no, like that we see the exact same thing, as because we work with a lot of people that are coming, even people out of cyber phase 2, they don't really have a thing. And so if you have a TRL 6 or 7 thing, it's like, I just ask them, hey, if I have somebody walk through, can I show this off to somebody?
Mm-hmm.
Can I ship this to somebody so they can try it and ship it back? If so, like, the government has a hard time buying technology. They want to buy capabilities, systems.
Yeah.
So if you have a subcomponent, it's almost impossible for you to deliver this, because there has to be a service wrapped. There has to be training. It has to be in a box or a Pelican case. It has to like have a computer associated with it. It like has to work. And you have like piece 1 out of 10, and you need to build the Lego set. We've been pretty effective at being like, okay, well, who actually does this service for X group right now? It's this company. Now they're your service provider,
Yeah.
So like, because there's such a driving demand for innovation, but innovation is like such an odd word, because it infers that there's change as the result of something being implemented, but people use it like there's this new like widget, like a gadget, or like some magic thing that's sitting and it has to be delivered.
Yeah. These are hard problems too. Like I think that sometimes gets lost. To make something invisible to radar is hard. To make something that's jam resistant is hard. To make something that can go through various temperature gradients from 150 degrees to negative 150 degrees, like stuff like that. These are hard problems to solve with any kind of technology. And that's why it's this sort of like systems engineering by committee, if you will, or like this communal engineering project. Even like the Lockheeds of the world, these prime systems integrators, they don't always own all the core technology, right? They typically will find partners to fill the individual puzzle pieces and bring it together, because these are really hard things. Like the innovation that happens just on, I remember just being in awe of the targeting system beneath the nose of an F-35. I was like, this is the coolest thing. And it had it's so many cool lines to it and so many cool products. I was like, Lockheed doesn't own all of this. They put this puzzle piece together because they figured out the specs. They went and found a vendor for it, a teaming partner for it. And I think on much smaller scales, you can see that as well. Even with like the modular payloads that can go on these commercial UAS to provide new search and rescue or counter insurgency type of like reconnaissance. Like, even if you don't have a drone, but you can build a really cool camera, there are ways to get that into the hands of the people that need it. And I think the point is just, how do you protect your IP? And how do you correlate demand signal? And how do you get people to vouch for you? But at the end of the day, fielding technology fast, I think if somebody has something off the shelf, it's easier to buy a payload than to build it, for example, with some of these UAS payloads, for example.
The compressive pressure of the industry to shift from years to months, like we're just off by a unit of measure. Hey, we're fielding new technology in 5 years. Like, hey guys, this is a computer in a Pelican case. Like, we can do this in 1 month. So like, let's conservatively say that instead of years, it's going to be months. Kind of compressive force we think is going to push for dual use and for more teaming, because you just you can't make a new like EIOR ball in 5 months, right? L3 already makes this. I'm Boeing. I'm making a new unmanned system. I'm going to partner with them because developing this new version is going to take 3 to 5 years. This is already approved. But I think that goes all the way down to smalls and startups that are like, I'm making a new power system. Okay, great.
I would just say, like, the way in the example you just gave, Boeing and L3 are not all of a sudden just seeing an RFP hit for the first time and be like, oh, hey guys, we should collaborate. That is like,
Yeah.
that conversation has been happening for 5+ years to say, hey, what's going to be the state of the art in 5 years and how can we position there? When I was at Lockheed, my team was focused on 15 years and backwards, right? Like, what is the fight going to be in 2035 and what do we need to get there? Like, let's literally go build out the roadmap.
Yeah. And shaping the requirements and looking at,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And that's where, I mean, again, I'm not trying to fly Pryzm too much here, but like, that's what we build for. Like, the secret sauce here is that by the time something's asked for by the government, it's usually too late to win sometimes because somebody's been shaping that for a few years. And so when you think about technology development, whether you're a startup or a big company, you got to be thinking about like, where's the puck going to be? Where is the world going to be? And how do I go build for that? On the other side of the fence too is, I do think we have a bit of like requirements creep sometimes in trying to perfectly predict what the the mission environment is going to look like in 5 years, and let's overspec to that. I think there's a lot of capabilities out there, especially in like the small unmanned systems realm, that's just like, let's just field something and let's just figure it out and let's just iterate. Let's make something cheap. I don't care how far this drone goes as long as it goes somewhat far. Let me build my con ops around that. I think there is a bit of change happening in the way the government's procuring some technologies around, like, let's just feel the capability and then let's figure it out. I do think some large systems obviously still have huge specs. I mean, look at how long it took NGAD to get across the line, but a lot of these commercial technology plays can fit into spaces where the government's like, hey, this is like below $2 million TINA threshold. Let's just buy it and use it and let's see what happens. So,
I mean, I'm a big fan of taking cues from what works from industry. Like, we make things. I've talked about this on other episodes, but you can look at how you write software, how you develop a product. It is an iterative, scaled approach, right? You don't write the entire software and then try to compile it. That's crazy, right? You engage users and you deploy, in startups, MVPs, or we like to think of everything as an experiment. Is like, I can't figure out what the requirements are, but if I field an experiment, I get better requirements out of that experiment. And so we can do that really, really fast. But that's a completely new concept because you're used to, you don't want an experiment with an F-35. But if we're talking about a quadcopter, like, why not? Like, why not? It's $200. Like, let's
well,
go for it.
if you're going to do an experiment with F-35, it's going to be partly funded by Lockheed so that they can have some say in like where the tech is going. But that does help inform the procurement cycle in 3 years. Hey, we can do this now. Let's see what we can get on for later. Like, that's part of the shaping effort. I also think, like, just in general, most DoD, when people think of like DoD procurement, they do think of like those large exquisite systems, which do still have a play here. Like, we are still investing in exquisite systems, but I think where people are looking to see for more innovation is in that more tactical level, rapid adjustment, rapid fielding, rapid prototyping space that isn't going to have as strict of requirements because it's not as high of an investment cost to begin with. So I kind of see both of those trends continuing, that we're still going to procure expensive air platforms, for example. I'm in the camp that says that we are still going to have manned fighter jets for a while.
Yeah, giant naval vessels, like, they're happening, but
Yeah,
so are small autonomous vessels.
totally. I think, and this is a broader conversation of just like humans' relationships with AI into the future. I think that AI is going to be a tool to augment the human experience and to augment human involvement in national security, not to replace it. Just the way that the EW space works alone, it's going to be very hard to just go put a bunch of forward deployed systems out there without being able to communicate, say, back to some like box in Nevada. Like that's just not going to work sometimes in some of these degraded environments. So I know I'm rambling on that topic alone, and we could go off on it, but
What are some interesting technology spaces? Because you have a fairly unique position in the market. You can see a lot of what's happening, and you're having a lot of conversations from an opportunity perspective or a budget perspective. What are some of the interesting technology spaces that you see, like problems people chasing after right now?
I think autonomy's got a huge pull towards it right now. I think just in terms of fielding attritable mass, like we talk about that across all domains. So that's like first and foremost, the one that's interesting me the most because of the dual use application. I think when it comes to airspace integration, for example, how do you make how do you make aircraft collaborate with human pilots? How do you field hundreds, if not thousands, of drones in the same airspace and interact with existing flight operations? Like that's a problem that directly applies to the FAA and commercial aviation. And people who worked with me at Lockheed know that I was like very passionate about that space for a while because I think it is a really good use case of dual use technology, and is one that we can directly benefit from. I will say space is undersea domains are becoming huge right now. I think that's just by nature of they kind of are the last frontiers. I think even cyberspace is no longer a final frontier. I wish there was a little bit more attention being paid to the cyber domain. I just think that our adversaries have watched us, field fighter jets in large volumes. But if you can take out a hospital with a laptop at a coffee shop, like what's the point of having a 500 fleet of F-35s right behind you? So those are some of the spaces I'm interested in. I'm also very interested in material science. I didn't spend too much time in school studying it, all things considered. But when I think about where does innovation come from, where is like an awesome opportunity to give back to broader society, I think it's in how materials can, conduct energy and how lightweight applications can become very, very strong for many types of applications. And so investments in material science are very cool to see. So I think those are some of my big ones. And then just as an av geek, whatever they're doing with F-22 and F-47, I think I'll always read those articles from the war zone or whatever they're posting.
Yeah. I think looking at those systems, and if anybody gets a chance, like here in DC area, we have Udvar Hazy, so you get go and see one of everything, right? But if you do get a chance to see literally under the hood of some of these systems, it is awe-inspiring what people are able to craft and create. And the problems do go all the way down to, in those systems, there was a machine that was invented to be able to make the connector that goes and is in that type of aircraft. And I'm not exaggerating at all. It's like there's $1 million machine to make a new type of connector that now we use across the industry that was invented for avionics. That's just one of these pieces. Thousands and thousands of innovations like rolled, stacked on top of each other to make this one thing. And when you start really breaking it apart and thinking about it, it is quite astonishing that planes fly.
Absolutely. We could riff on this, man. If you just walking onto a commercial aircraft, if you like look at the door, when you walk in, it looks kind of ugly and you're like, what are all these shapes? But you realize that so much engineering had to go into just making sure that door doesn't blow off.
Yeah, or your tray, right? Your food tray they're different on different airplanes. And I always like to look at, okay, how have they adjusted this one because they've moved the seats around, right? And how it pops up and moves out and moves around because you don't have a fold down tray.
Yeah.
Somebody spent a lot of effort figuring that out, and it's just super cool to me. And it's like often overlooked, that little element of innovation, how that works down to the smallest, granule.
We take so much for granted. Like there are so many cool technologies that just, exist without anybody ever noticing. And I think it's like one of the reasons why like I could love engineering for forever. And like I could do 5 lifetimes of careers in this space because there are so many cool little small spaces that make up these overall systems. Yeah.
What we're really excited about is boring things, honestly, because I'll take your autonomy example for this, is that there's just data transport and processing issues that are associated with autonomy. And so, hey, we've worked with a couple of different swarm rapid deployment UAV systems, and that's great. They're spending all this time on the AI autonomy or on the sensor system or the actual platform itself, but they have really boring problems. Like we're having issues with packet loss, which means that the orchestration doesn't work, or edge processing because we don't have expeditionary power or cooling in this box doesn't work. K-Forms like just really bullish about building the boring parts of platforms because it's often super overlooked where somebody has this incredible technology, but like their box just gets too hot.
Yeah.
And so they have to, it's funny, but they have to start all over.
Mm-hmm.
They've just wasted hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars because they haven't thought about the boring pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So we see that problem across all the really interesting spaces. It's like there's just a place for everyone to contribute, and there's a lot of white space around doing boring things. Expeditionary power is like a really good example. It's in general done very poorly in the industry, but everybody needs power, right? So there's just an example of that attached to every cool, sexy, like exciting thing. There's just some, lame. Everybody
It's
needs
not
it.
lame. It's just it's hard to understand sometimes, right? People like look at a jet, they're like, oh, cool thing goes fast. Nice. All right, that pilot's a hot shot. But what they don't think about is like the electronics engineer that wired up the avionics system to be able to withstand a bunch of G-forces, for example. That's pretty cool. One space I wish I could get smarter on is clocks. I think like especially in the context of positioning and timing and all the alt PNT and degraded environments, that problem space, in order to figure out where you are in time and space is seemingly very trivial. But when you're like fully isolated from connectivity that everybody just assumes is real, or sorry, not real, but it is just assumes is always there, it's really interesting to see how precise you can get with like timing of clocks. And I think that's a really like beautiful thing that we've had forever. Human society has always had ways of telling time, and we're still innovating in 2025 on ways to get more precise and more resilient in how we tell time.
Non-GPS PNT solutions totally disconnected.
Yeah.
We talked to somebody that they have a very particular solution for reading just the magnetic currents of where you are.
That's so cool.
I don't want to like dive into detail, but like you can look at the research around this, but they have a way to be as accurate or more accurate than any other system, and it doesn't use any.
Yeah,
it's like
why?
But what I find is interesting for this dual use is like if somebody has that research or they have that technology, and they're thinking like, okay, I could get paid $10 by Amazon to put this on quadcopters for whenever Amazon decides to do like delivery by drone or some, like who's going to pay for this technology? Go look at the federal space and look at there's opportunities for non-dilutive capital. There's opportunities for developing prototypes that they might not be meaningful to an established company. It might not be meaningful to a large company, but for an innovator that has some patents or has a lot of research or is coming out of academia and wants to start a company, getting $1 million for an SBIR phase 2 is like pretty great. It's not going to make you a successful company because there's other things that you need to do to figure out how to get that on contract, but it is very meaningful. And if you can go look at those spaces, like who cares about PNT, right? And then you find out, okay, well, it's kind of a behind the scenes thing. Everyone cares about it, first of all.
Yeah.
It's a undervalued and overlooked step. People have their TRL6, TRL7 thing. Effectively, we think of any commercial product as soon as we move it over to defense is not going to be any higher than TRL6. So that's why I say that is because there's always some change that we would.
It's gonna,
yeah. But looking at that space and looking at super high value problems from a monetary or impact or triple bottom line, however you want to call that perspective, we like working on interesting problems with interesting people. We like making cool stuff. So if you like to work on hard things and work on interesting projects, I think national security kind of has that locked down, but also they're always like 10x or 100x problems. So I'm like a big proponent of people exploring the space, and it's kind of why we're showing off your platform to these these companies is like, who cares about this? There some people that we talk to, they've been struggling for years to like figure out who could I sell this idea to. You can search it; it's public information, but having a tool to be able to search and just be like, these people have $5 million. This
Yes.
is what they spent last year.
Yeah.
This is the person's name. Like is unbelievably eye-opening. Or the converse is like nobody's spending money on this the way that you're describing it. You need to describe it like this, or this is the problem set that you really should be chasing with the technology that you have. I think that that's incredibly powerful. The product market fit is different, or the technology problem fit is like completely different in the space.
Yeah. Well, that's where like the rubber meets the road here, right? Is I think there's a lot of interest in national security. It's the hot thing in the venture market right now. Defense tech is like just a cool brand, like thanks to Palantir and Anduril, like everybody's in on that right now. But the point of actually, there's a huge difference between having an idea of what is based on your view of the world versus like a big enough view of the world that it can actually move somewhere. And I found myself kind of falling into this trap when I was even at Lockheed. I thought I was chasing a really cool idea because I didn't know anything about the world that I was going into. And this was in the aerospace integration world. And so what I didn't know made me think that my idea was unique. And I was like, oh my God, like this is so exciting. I want to keep chasing this. And there was definitely an energy, an entrepreneurial spirit that came from feeling like I had this unique idea. But the more that I talked to people, the more that I realized, oh, like they've been thinking about this, but in this way. And it helped me refine where I was going with it, to the point where I realized, hey, I know where this idea is. I kind of want to like draw a line with it, go focus on applying some of my learnings in other areas. And I think that's part of the entrepreneurial process. And especially when you talk about bringing things from academia or from the academic world, the university research labs, into the actual field technology space, I think you need to be willing to let market information help you check and adjust, and you don't just stick to one idea. Because I do think, unfortunately, you can get pretty far on SBIR funding on a technology that may not actually like move the needle at a program of record stage. And if you want to just iterate and be an inventor and a tinkerer, like go for it. But I think you still need to know what that ultimate product that you fit into is. Because at the end of the day, that's everything has to fit into a product concept for it to be viable, or else you're just kind of like spending money to blow stuff up in a lab, right? And I think we want to encourage people to be curious, be excited, but constantly try to figure out, where does this fit in? What is the global opportunity here? Why do I care about this beyond just my selfish motivation to build something myself or build something cool or apply what I've learned in school? That's where I think, being able to use, teams like yours or products like mine helps bring that like product perspective into actually technology fielding and not just whiteboard engineering.
Can you talk through that process a little bit? Let's say that I have a thing, or I'm a subject matter expert in a space. Like, how do I go about figuring out what I should focus on, like how I should talk about it, who's interested?
Yeah. I mean, I think it actually starts before you go external, is actually doing like a positioning exercise yourself. Like if you're really interested in nano technology in like fluids, for example, like you can just get lost in that world and just like want to optimize for the results you're trying to measure for. But what's important is you like step out of the lab and you're like, okay, what am I doing here? I'm building something that can, be controlled. It can be controlled in small places. What problems exist that, I'm aware of, and being able to connect that problem space to something like internal medicine, for example, and being able to say, I may not know exactly how this fits together, but internal medicine is a really important problem in America, in the world. And I wonder what the biggest challenges in that market are, for example. Then you start doing research on, where is funding for internal, research, internal medicine research going, right? You start seeing contracts for startups that are winning grants in the internal medicine research space. Oh, okay. I hadn't seen anybody doing nano stuff, but I see a lot of people doing, I'm just making this up, fluid creation. I don't know. I'm not a bio guy, but for some reason I'm hooked on that example. You start like figuring out where's the money going right now? What are people talking about? What am I doing? And then, okay, I'm seeing something about fluid creation and I've been doing this stuff that's really about like microsystem development. Where is that overlap? Well, that's where the inventor, the entrepreneur in you gets to say, well, maybe it's this. Okay, cool. Write that down. Now go talk to somebody, go find an industry conference, go figure out where, the American College of Surgeons is meeting and talking about that topic, and just go walk up to somebody. I do think that just good old fashioned networking helps here. LinkedIn is becoming just a bit noisy, but the point is you got to figure out, where's the market? What do I have? And then have a hypothesis. And then once you have that hypothesis, go talk to some people. When Pryzm was first getting started, we put together like 2 or 3 pages of a concept on PowerPoint, printed off like 10 copies, and we went to A&D program management conference, like literally just program managers in the aerospace world talking about program management problems, earned value management, contracts timing, flow of funds, international competition. But we were just sitting at lunch when I got to talk to people and going around the room. Hey, what's your name? My name's Matt. I do this. Oh, that's interesting. And I'm like, well, tell me what you do. And then I just ask questions based on my hypothesis. So for a long time, it was just hypothesis testing. But then somebody knows somebody, and then they say, oh, I'm actually in this, program where we're actually working with the government to define, we're to work on our prototypes. Oh, what's that program called? Oh, it's called DIU Accelerator, whatever. Hey, how can I get into that? And then all of a sudden, now you're plugged in your next thing. And it's just, you got to like leapfrog between how your hypothesis aligns to your understanding of the world and what other people have for an understanding of their world. And one of like the core things that Pryzm has now become is this way of tracing all of that context into like one graphical interface, being able to tell that story so that you can begin to figure out how these relationships all correlate. Now, I'm using some buzzwords, of course, but when I think about like starting with an idea and actually getting into the field, you need to kind of do that iterative process of saying, here's what I think, here's my worldview, let me find somebody else's worldview, let me see where they can bounce off of each other. And then you get to your concept, maybe you get some time and money to go chase it down even further, but typically people will only give you money if you have a really clear view of what you're going to do with it. And then the process just continues to iterate. You get more money, you get more product, you get more interest, like the flywheel begins to go. And once the flywheel gets going, it's really addicting.
I want to pull out the trade show piece because before we hit record, we were talking about Soft Week. That's what it does for us, right? Is we go talk to people, you can get in front of users, but we'll have TRL 9 deployed products there, and we'll also have product concepts. Like, what do you think about this? How are you doing this right now? But to get more feedback from people until we understand the words that they use for the problems that they have, and 2, looking at products that are in the space that suffer from this problem and like, what are the words that they use? So then I can take that vocabulary, those buzzwords, and then I can go feed them in and say, who is funding around DDIL? What the hell is that? Right. And I'm like, okay, so that's a very common term. So now I know this thing. Well, who's funding these kinds of problems? Because I think my technology can help solve this one piece of that puzzle. And so knowing the context of that problem is really important for us. Like in a few days in a trade show, you can get a lot of information together. People go into them thinking that it's a sales conference, but for us, it's a business development and market intelligence exercise. Like, one, we want to see our friends, right? And we want to develop partners, teaming partners, potential tech partners. Everybody's there, but there's always like new buzzwords that are associated with funding. A few years ago, it was, future G or 5G, and it's still around. But like, if you didn't have 5G and you didn't hit the buzzwords that people were saying with 5G, probably weren't getting your expeditionary project funded. And I look at them like, I can just put a 5G card in here. Like, I don't really understand the big deal, but like, if I don't say that I can do that, I'm probably not getting this like C2 platform funded.
Yeah. In the current cycle. And I think one thing I want to highlight is that, like, yes, it is about meeting the government customers and understanding what they need, but the government also uses this to do that commercial market research that is otherwise opaque for them, right? And so while you may be using their terms this year, in 3 years, they may be using yours. So if you're thinking about next gen comms in a different way, start planting those seeds of how you see the world, and eventually you'll start to see, on the government side, it changes what they ask for. And at the end of the day, too, like, their budgets are aligned to certain requirements and priorities that have their own buzzwords to them. But in the future years, you can shape that.
I'll use a specific example of this for us, is that for years I've been telling people that a lot of their implementations that they use radios for, they should use their phones.
Okay.
People do not like that conversation at all, but there's very recent chatter about doing exactly this. Is like, you already have the phone as a EUD for tactical operations. They already have the phone. They're already using it. They're using TAC on it, and it already has It already has wireless. In fact, it has multi-path backhaul, and it's super robust solution. A lot of these applications, you're using like the wrong thing for the wrong thing. And so your phone does all of these, or like the tablet version of that phone does all of these pieces. And we've had this conversation like 100 times with people. 99 out of 100 of those times, like we have used a radio, right? But now, just the other day, I read, hey, we're going to start pulling back on these radios, and for a lot of these applications, we're going to use phones. And I'm like, that's cool, So like, you can have these conversations with people, and so there's a group that's like, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. We basically, this whole platform now is like a cell phone charger. We plug in phones and it does this thing, versus like we had an extra device and extra device and extra device and the phone before, and we realized like you don't need any of those devices because it's all, the phone does the whole thing.
Again, finding ways to work with existing technology and then adjusting that technology if needed over time.
But yeah, that conversation's been like three plus years in the running.
Yeah.
No, well, and it's here now, right? But you learn a lot, and like then you can see change over time, and now you're innovating. But like, yeah, the conversations go two ways, right?
Who was it that said humans have a tendency to overestimate what's capable in the near term and underestimate what's capable in the long term? Was that Bill Gates or some version of what I just said?
Yeah. Some version. Yeah,
like
yeah.
It's so funny to watch like videos of people talking about credit cards in the 90s. People being like, "Oh, this isn't going anywhere. This is dumb. Like, why wouldn't you pay with cash?"
It's so much easier. Yeah, I'm going to pay with a credit card for like a $2.37 hamburger. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that may have been related to the fee structures and stuff, but that's a separate conversation. So you guys are going to Soft Week. So we are going to see you guys at Soft Week.
Yep.
Okay,
yep.
Cool.
Yeah, we'll see you guys down there. But Matt, before we go, what are you really excited about? I want to pull a golden nugget. Like what's a tip that somebody should be looking, because there's a lot of change right now. The market's fairly chaotic, but if you had a technology, you wanted to get it on contract, like give me a tip. Like what would you do? What would Matt Hawkins do if you decide to stick with being an ME instead of building first?
Yeah. I need to think about that for a second. What I'm generally excited about, it does seem like this administration has a preference towards commercial first technology and investing in commercial technologies where possible. I mean, like the DIU just tripled his budget in this most recent reconciliation package. And so I'm seeing that's only 3 billion or only 2 billion. That's still a sizable signal that like there is interest in commercial technology. So I'm generally excited about that. I think this administration has also just taken a serious interest in just transparency around how we spend money, and for better or for worse, I think it's happening. And so I think that's something that I am watching with excitement. If I could do it all over again, or not do it all again, what am I? I'm like not even 30. If I could like start a company today that's not in like the Pryzm space, I would first think like, okay, like what is the world going to be in 5 years, and how do I, or 7 years, and how do I like get to that? And I think a lot about airspace management world. I think a lot about airborne transportation. I really like what's going on in the maritime domain. There's a lot of shipbuilding emphasis. There's a lot of new watercraft coming about.
We really like littoral UUV platforms. Yeah. Very, very interesting things happening in that space.
And I will always shout out Regent, another New England company here. Like those guys are crushing it. I don't know. I'd say whatever you do, maybe this is where my golden nugget comes in. Like whatever you do in the early stages, try to find like actual contracts, but which are in like a prototype type of context. Like at the end of the day, like prototype OTAs are becoming wildly successful with startups. We're on one right now, and it's been such a relief from a contracts perspective in terms of like how much burden we've had to bear as a small enterprise ourselves. It's been a very linear process. Working with the government's been straightforward as I can remember. The process was relatively transparent, and I felt like it was fair. And I think that it gives the buyer a lot of flexibility, right? So prototype OTAs, I think is like what I'm trying to say here is like go find who's asking for what on prototype OTAs. The problem is that they go by very fast. So if you're looking for a new idea to start, don't go look at the existing prototype OTAs because they're going to get funded. Somebody's going to follow on. That ship will have sailed. And so you kind of need to find organizations that do leverage those types of contract vehicles like DIU, like SOCOM, try to understand where their mission spaces go, for example. But at the end of the day, you should build what you want to build. Like, don't just go build, alt P&T devices because you think that will get you a contract in the future. I think what you should do is, if you're going to go build alt P&T devices, it should be because, say you're really interested in hiking and getting in the outdoors and you want to be able to have, 100%, clean navigation for your adventures in Antarctica, for example. I don't know. That might not be a good place for alt P&T solutions. Point is, you should pick something that you're passionate about, but then figure out which organizations have the acquisition environment that's conducive to early stage companies. And I think, yes, AFWorks has been great, but that has become a saturated space. I think SOCOM has become well-renowned as a supportive organization for early stage companies, but they still need prototypes to go use. Like, they're not investing in like too many pre-prototype ideas compared to what they're investing in that they can actually go out and field and break and try it. So yeah, it really comes down to like what stage your product's in and what contracting vehicles those organizations can get you on, because you don't want to be stuck waiting after SBIR phase 2 for this like infinite waiting time around SBIR's phase 3s or future, follow-ons and stuff. I find that is, people talk about like the valley of death. It really comes after SBIR phase 2. And if you can find ways to go around that, I highly encourage people to think about alternate vehicles for that.
It's amazing. Matt, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. Callye, thank you, man. We'll see you next week. We'll be getting dinner down in Tampa.
Yep.
So good stuff, man. Thank you so much. This was awesome. Peace.
My name is Callye Keen, and this has been the Startup Defense.